My name is Myra. I'm 34, and I'm a certified public accountant, which means I spend my days chasing numbers that refuse to reconcile. On my daughter's 8th birthday, I found one stitched into the collar of a pink dress. My parents mailed it. It didn't come to the party. Lily pulled the dress from the box, and her whole face lit up for exactly 3 seconds. Then she froze. Her small fingers traced the embroidery along the collar, and she looked up at me. "What is this, Mommy?" I took the dress. My hands were trembling before I finished reading. The name on it wasn't hers. I didn't cry. I went straight to my laptop and started pulling bank statements. What I found behind a door at the end of my parents' hallway, I'll never unsee. By the next morning, they were calling without stop. They had no idea the dress was the smallest thing I'd uncover. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet betrayals families never speak aloud, and the women who finally set them right. Drop a comment, tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. The morning of Lily's birthday began the way every important day in my family began, with me handling everything. I'd been up since 5. Streamers hung from the kitchen ceiling. A sheet cake sat in the fridge, decorated with butterflies, because Lily had been captivated by monarchs since spring. Daniel, my husband, had rigged a scavenger hunt through the backyard, tucking clues inside mason jars, and our daughter was already bouncing off the furniture by 7 a.m. It should have been simple. 8 years old, cake, friends, presents, bedtime. But my parents had called the week before to say they wouldn't make it. My mother, Carol, said my father, Roger, had a cardiology follow-up that couldn't be rescheduled. She said it twice, which is how I knew she'd rehearsed it. I didn't push back. I never did. I was the daughter who adjusted, who covered, who picked up the phone and said, "Of course," before the other person finished their sentence. That's not a personality trait. It's a skill you develop when you grow up in a house where one child gets everything and the other gets leftovers with a lecture about gratitude. I told Lily that Grandma and Grandpa had sent a special package instead. Her eyes went wide. She'd always treasured their gifts, not because they were expensive, but because she believed they had chosen each one just for her. I used to believe that too. The box arrived by UPS around noon. White cardboard, my mother's handwriting on the shipping label, a strip of pink tissue paper peeking through the seam. I set it on the present table between a stack of coloring books and a stuffed owl from Daniel's mother. I went back to frosting cupcakes. I had no idea that a $9 embroidery job was about to fracture 3 years of lies. I should tell you who I am outside of birthday parties, because it matters later. I'm a CPA at a mid-sized firm in Virginia. I handle audits, which means I read other people's financials for a living and flag the things they hope no one would ever notice. I'm good at it. I'm good at it because I learned early that nothing in my house came free. At least not for me. Growing up, my sister Emily got what she wanted simply by asking. I got what I needed by building a case. I'm not exaggerating. When I was 14 and needed new cleats for soccer, my mother made me write out why I deserved them. 3 paragraphs, front and back of a notebook page. She read it at the kitchen table, crossed out a line about the hole in my old pair's toe, and told me she'd think about it. Emily got a new phone that same week. No essay required. I stopped asking after a while. Got a job bussing tables at 15 and opened my own checking account at 16. Community college, then night school for my CPA license while working full-time at a tax prep office that smelled like carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. Every dollar I earned without assistance. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing that as unfair and started treating it as proof I could survive anything. The problem with proof like that is you carry it everywhere. You become the person who fixes things, the person who wires money when situations get tight, the person who arrives with solutions while everyone else arrives with opinions. I thought that was love. Being indispensable. I thought being useful and being valued were the same thing. It took a pink dress with someone else's name on it to teach me they aren't even close. Emily was 3 years older than me, and as far as my parents were concerned, the sun rose because she smiled at it. She had the kind of confidence that consumed a room. Loud laugh, grand plans, always the center of whatever story was being told at dinner. My mother adored her in a way that felt almost physical, like Emily was an extension of her own body. They dressed alike when Emily was small. They whispered together in the kitchen. They had rituals I was never invited into. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it because you need to understand the architecture of my family before I show you where the cracks are. My father, Roger, was quieter, a retired electrician with a weak heart and a habit of watching from the recliner without ever commenting. He loved both of us, I think, but he loved Carol more than he loved being fair. So he went along. The one person who saw it clearly was my grandmother, Ruth. My mother's mother, 86 now, sharp as a letter opener. She lived 15 minutes away, and every time she visited, she'd find a reason to sit with me alone. "You're the strong one," she told me once, peeling apples at her counter. "That's why they lean on you and forget to say thank you." I was 12. I didn't know what to do with that. So I shrugged and ate the apple. But I remembered. There's one more thing about our house. At the end of the upstairs hallway, past the bathroom and the linen closet, there was a door that stayed closed. Emily's old bedroom. After she left, my mother kept it exactly as it was. Posters on the wall, lavender comforter, yearbooks stacked on the desk. Nobody discussed it. Nobody opened it. It was just there, like a tooth you can't stop tonguing. Emily didn't just leave. She detonated. For most of her 20s, she drifted between boyfriends, business ideas, and borrowed money. She'd call my parents at 2 in the morning asking for a wire transfer. She'd appear at Thanksgiving with a new man and a new plan and leave before the dishes were washed. The plans always collapsed. The men always disappeared. The money never returned. By 33, she'd maxed out my parents' credit card, taken a $15,000 loan from their retirement fund, and convinced my father to co-sign a lease on an apartment she abandoned 4 months later. Then, 3 years ago, almost to the week, she vanished. No call, no forwarding address, just a text to my mother that read, "I need space. Don't look for me." Carol was devastated. She called me 6 times that first day. She called the police, who told her a 34-year-old woman leaving voluntarily wasn't a missing person. She called Emily's last boyfriend, who hung up. She sat in Emily's bedroom for 3 hours with the door locked. My father stood in the hallway with his hand on the knob and didn't go in. And here's the detail that should have told me everything. They never blamed Emily. Not once. Not for the credit card, not for the retirement money, not for vanishing without a word. In my parents' version, Emily was a victim of misfortune, of bad men, of a world that simply didn't understand her. "She's just lost," my mother would say, pressing her palm flat on the kitchen table like she was holding something down. "She'll find her way back." I wanted to believe her. I sent money every month after that. For Dad's heart, for the house. I never asked where it went. That was my mistake. Here's how the arrangement worked. After Emily vanished and my parents' finances collapsed, I set up autopay. $1,200 a month toward their mortgage. $400 for Roger's supplemental health insurance, because Medicare didn't cover the cardiologist he required. Another $110 for the family phone plan, their 2 lines plus mine, bundled together. And every few months, Carol would call with something additional. A water heater, a property tax bill, an ER copay from one of Roger's episodes that they hadn't budgeted for. I never said no. I'd pull up my spreadsheet, adjust the budget Daniel and I kept on the fridge, and send whatever she asked. "Honey, your father's heart can't wait," she'd say, her voice dropping to that soft, fractured register she reserved for when she needed something. "You're the only one we can count on." I believed her. Or maybe I chose to believe her, because the alternative, that I was pouring money into something I didn't fully understand, was too uncomfortable to sit with. Daniel never complained, but he asked questions I didn't want to answer. "Your dad's insurance should cover most of the cardiac stuff," he said once, scrolling through a provider website on his phone. "Do they have a secondary plan or something?" "It's complicated," I told him. He held my gaze for a long beat, then set the phone down. "Okay." It wasn't okay. He knew it. I knew it. But admitting the numbers didn't add up would have meant doing the one thing I'd spent my entire life avoiding, questioning whether my mother was telling me the truth. I'm a CPA. I reconcile other people's books for a living. I couldn't bring myself to open my own family's ledger. Not yet. Lily is the reason I finally did. My daughter is 8 years old, a head taller than most kids in her class, and the kind of child who reads field guides for enjoyment. She collects rocks. She labels them with masking tape and stores them in an egg carton under her bed. She once spent 45 minutes explaining the difference between igneous and sedimentary to a cashier at Target who had not asked. She's the best thing I've ever done, and she's the thing I'd burn everything down to protect. What concerned me about my parents wasn't anything dramatic. It was small. It was the way my mother started making certain remarks. She reminds me so much of Emily at that age. Emily used to hold her fork like that. Look at those eyes, pure Emily. The first few times I let it pass. Kids get compared to relatives. It's normal. But it kept happening. Every visit, Carol found a new way to map Emily onto my daughter. She bought Lily a lavender blanket, the same shade as the comforter in Emily's room. She enrolled Lily in a children's painting class without consulting me, because Emily had loved to paint. When I picked Lily up from their house one Sunday, her hair was styled in 2 French braids, the same style my mother had done for Emily every school morning. "Grandma did my hair like her special girl," Lily told me, climbing into her car seat. I gripped the steering wheel and said nothing. The door at the end of the hallway, I noticed it was open a crack the last time I walked past. Just an inch. Just enough to see the lavender bedspread undisturbed, but the closet light was on. Someone had been in there recently. I drove home and told myself it didn't mean anything. The party wound down around 4. Lily's school friends had been picked up. The backyard was scattered with burst balloons and juice boxes, and Daniel was hosing cake off the patio table. Lily sat on the living room floor, surrounded by wrapping paper, already sorting her presents into categories. Books, art supplies, things to show her teacher. "Can I open Grandma's now?" she asked, reaching for the white box. "Go ahead, baby." She tore through the tissue paper. Inside was a dress, pink cotton A-line, with a Peter Pan collar and small pearl buttons down the front. Lily held it up and grinned. "It's so pretty." She pressed it against her chest and twirled. Then she stopped. She turned the collar over, running her thumb across the embroidery on the inside. White thread, neat cursive, stitched into the fabric like a label. "What is this, Mommy?" I crossed the room. I took the collar between my fingers and read the name. Emily. Not Lily. Emily stitched into a brand new dress sized for an 8-year-old, sent by my parents for my daughter's birthday. My hands began to tremble. I kept my face composed. Lily was watching me with that expression children get when they sense something is wrong but cannot yet name it. "Is that another girl's name?" she asked. It's a mistake, sweetheart," I managed. "Grandma probably mixed up the order." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her books. I folded the dress and set it on the counter. Then I noticed the card tucked into the bottom of the box. My mother's handwriting, loopy and deliberate. "For our little Emily, with all our love, Grandma and Grandpa." Our little Emily. Daniel came in from the patio, saw my expression, and set down the hose. "What happened?" I handed him the card. He read it twice. Neither of us said a word. That night, after Lily was asleep and Daniel was reading in bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and the dress folded beside me. I typed one message to my mother. Short, measured, the kind of text a CPA sends when she's not ready to accuse, but needs the record noted. "Mom, why does Lily's dress say Emily?" I hit send and placed the phone face down on the counter. Then I went to bed. I didn't sleep much. I kept seeing the cursive on the collar. Neat, intentional, paid for. This wasn't a warehouse error. Somebody had placed that order. Somebody had typed Emily into a personalization field and clicked confirm. By 6 a.m., my phone had 11 missed calls. 6 from my mother, 5 from my father's line, which meant my mother using his phone after hers went to voicemail. I let them ring. That was new for me. My entire life I'd picked up by the second ring. Carol had trained me to be available the way you train a dog to sit, through repetition and the quiet threat of disappointment. Not answering felt like holding my breath underwater. Uncomfortable, disorienting, but clarifying. By 7, a text came through from Carol. "Myra, please call. It's not what you think. We can explain." I read it while pouring Lily's cereal. Daniel glanced over my shoulder, read the screen, and poured himself a coffee without comment. He'd spent 10 years watching me abandon everything the moment my parents called. The fact that I was sitting still, eating toast, letting the phone buzz on the counter, he knew something had shifted. He didn't press. He simply set a second mug in front of me and sat down. I decided I wasn't going to call back. I was going to drive over, and I wasn't going to tell them I was coming. My mother called again at 8:15 while I was buckling Lily into the car for day camp. I picked up this time, not because I was ready, but because I needed to hear what version of the truth she had constructed overnight. "Sweetheart, thank God." Carol's voice was pitched high, relieved, already steering the conversation toward a conclusion she'd rehearsed. "I got your text. Honey, it's just a name we've always loved. Your father and I thought it would be sweet, a family name like a tradition." "Emily isn't a family name, Mom. It's a person's name. A specific person." Silence. Then, well, of course. "But that doesn't mean, we weren't trying to. You had a dress custom embroidered with my sister's name and sent it to my 8-year-old daughter." She recalibrated. I could hear it. The breath, the brief pause before the new angle clicked into place. "You're reading too much into this, Myra. You always do this. You take something simple and turn it into a whole investigation." That word, investigation. I filed it away. "Your father needs his refill picked up, by the way," she added, pivoting the way she always did when a conversation edged too close to something real. "The pharmacy on Route 9. Could you?" "I'll handle it," I said, and ended the call. I sat in the driveway for a moment. Lily was singing softly in the back seat, tapping her sandals against the car seat frame. Carol had done something telling on that call. She'd used the present tense, a name we've always loved. Not loved. Love. And she'd said, "Emily always looks best in pink." Not looked. Looks, as if Emily were still here. As if she were still 8 years old and waiting for a dress. 3 days later, the money call came. It always came. Roger had a follow-up appointment, Carol said. The specialist wanted additional imaging, an echocardiogram, possibly a stress test. "The copay alone is $400, she told me, her voice thin and weary. "And you know your father won't ask." "I know he won't," I said. "Because you always do." She ignored that. She'd developed a particular kind of selective deafness over the years. Anything that sounded like pushback simply didn't register. I told her I'd look into it and hung up. Then I did something I should have done 2 years ago. I pulled up the insurance portal. The supplemental plan I'd been funding at $400 a month since Roger's first cardiac episode covered specialist visits at 90% after the deductible, which had already been met in January. An echocardiogram copay under that plan was $42. Not $400. $42. I sat at my desk and stared at the screen. The math was simple, and that's what made it so ugly. If the insurance was covering the bulk of Roger's treatment, and I was also sending $1,200 a month toward the mortgage, and Carol was still requesting additional money every few months, where was the rest going? I opened a fresh spreadsheet. Blank cells, cursor blinking in A1. In the last 12 months alone, I had sent my parents just over $23,000 beyond the mortgage and insurance autopay. Carol had attributed every dollar to Roger's health, house repairs, or property taxes. I pulled their county's property tax records online, paid in full on time for the last 3 years. The money was going somewhere. Just not where she said. If you've ever been the one who quietly holds an entire family together and started to wonder where it all really goes, you already know this feeling. It's not anger at first. It's arithmetic. Stay with me. Comment. I see it. And let's keep going. I spent that evening cross-referencing everything. Bank statements from the last 36 months. Zelle confirmations. The autopay history for the mortgage servicer, the insurance company, the phone plan. I printed it all because I'm the kind of person who needs paper. Daniel sat across from me, assembling Lily's new bookshelf from the birthday haul, and watched me sort pages into stacks without asking what I was doing. He'd ask when I was ready. He always did. By 10 p.m., I had 3 columns. Column 1, money I'd sent, itemized by month. Column 2, what Carol said it was for, heart stuff, house stuff, living expenses. Column 3, what I could actually verify. The gap between columns 2 and 3 was just over $41,000 across 3 years. $41,000 I could not account for. It wasn't in the mortgage. It wasn't in the medical claims. It wasn't in the property tax records. I leaned back in my chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. Daniel set down the Allen wrench. How bad? $41,000. Bad. He didn't whistle or swear. He simply nodded slowly, like a man confirming something he'd long suspected but never wanted to say aloud. You need to go over there, he said. Yeah. Bring your phone. Photograph anything you find. I know. And Myra. He waited until I looked at him. Check that room. He meant the one at the end of the hallway. The one with the door that was always closed. I drove to my parents' house on a Wednesday. I knew their schedule. Roger had physical therapy at 10 o'clock, and Carol always drove him because she didn't trust him behind the wheel since his last episode. They'd be gone at least 90 minutes. I let myself in with the spare key under the ceramic frog by the side door, the same frog that had been there since I was 9. The house smelled like lemon cleaner with something stale beneath it. The way old houses do when the windows don't get opened enough. Everything looked the same. Roger's recliner with its permanent dent. Carol's cross-stitch sampler above the mantel. The kitchen table where I'd once written my essay about soccer cleats, still covered in the same vinyl tablecloth. I walked upstairs, past the bathroom, past the linen closet with the stuck door, past the framed school photos. Emily's large and centered. Mine smaller, tucked to the side. And then I was standing at the end of the hallway. This door. It had been closed every time I'd visited for 3 years, sometimes locked. Once, when Lily had wandered toward it during a Thanksgiving visit, Carol had intercepted her so swiftly she nearly knocked the child over. That's Grandma's private room, sweetheart. Private. I placed my hand on the knob. It turned. No lock this time. The door swung open onto carpet that hadn't been vacuumed in weeks. The lavender comforter on the bed was exactly as I remembered, smoothed, squared, pulled hospital tight. The yearbooks were still on the desk. The beach sunset poster was still thumbtacked above the headboard. But the closet door was open, and the light was on. Someone had been in here recently, and they had left the evidence sitting right in plain view. The closet was full in a way it hadn't been before. Emily's old clothes had been pushed to one side, high school hoodies, a prom dress in a dry cleaning bag, and in their place, stacked neatly on the floor, were 4 cardboard boxes. I pulled out the first one. Inside, folded in tissue paper, were children's clothes. Small, sized for a girl between 6 and 10. Dresses, cardigans, a pair of Mary Janes still in the shoebox. Every single item had the same embroidery on the collar or the tag. Emily. I set the first box down and opened the second. More clothes. A pink rain jacket with Emily stitched on the inside pocket. A set of monogrammed hair ribbons. A jewelry box containing a small bracelet engraved with E.B. Emily Brandt. These weren't keepsakes from Emily's childhood. The tags were current. The sizes were current. Someone had been purchasing children's clothing in Emily's name, in sizes that fit an 8-year-old. In sizes that fit Lily. My knees gave out. I sat down on the carpet. The third box was different. No clothes. Inside was a manila folder thick with papers. I opened it and found a stack of Zelle transfer confirmations printed on plain white paper, each one showing a payment from my parents' bank account to a recipient in Reno, Nevada. The name on the receiving end was Emily Brandt. The amounts ranged from $300 to $800. Some months showed 2 transfers. The oldest receipt was dated 3 years ago, 2 weeks after Emily's "Don't look for me" text. The most recent was last month. I flipped through every page. Every dollar matched the timeline of Carol's requests to me. Every copay I'd covered, every water heater, every panicked call about property taxes. The real money had been rerouted. A pipeline running from my checking account to an address in Nevada I had never seen. At the bottom of the folder, paperclipped to the final receipt, was a handwritten note in my mother's cursive. Don't tell Myra. She wouldn't understand. I sat on the floor of my sister's shrine and did the math. It's what I do. It's the only thing I could do. 36 months of transfers. An average of $580 per payment, sometimes twice a month. The total, calculated on my phone with the kind of hollow precision that keeps accountants from screaming in parking lots, was just over $38,000. $38,000 of the $41,000 I couldn't account for. The gap closed with a sound that felt like a bone snapping. My parents hadn't been struggling. Roger's heart condition was real, but the bills were covered, because I covered them. The house was stable, because I paid the mortgage. The phone worked, because I funded the plan. Every extra dollar Carol extracted from me, every fabricated emergency, every trembling call about your father's heart, it had all gone to Emily in Reno. For 3 years. They knew where she was. They had always known. The "don't look for me" text. The grief. The locked bedroom door. It was theater. Carol's performance staged for an audience of one me. The reliable daughter. The fixer. The one who would keep writing checks as long as she believed her father was dying and her sister was gone. I heard the front door open downstairs. Keys dropping into the ceramic bowl on the hall table. Roger's slow, heavy footsteps. Then the creak of the recliner. Carol's voice rising up the staircase. "Myra, is that your car outside?" I looked down at the folder in my lap. "Don't tell." Myra stared back at me. I slipped my phone into my pocket. I had photographed every single page. Then I stood up, closed the closet, and walked out of the room. Carol was at the bottom of the stairs when I came down. She looked at me, then looked past me at the hallway, at the door I'd left slightly ajar, and her face moved through something. Not panic. Recognition. The expression of a woman who had been quietly waiting for this moment and had already rehearsed her way through it. "You went into Emily's room," she said. Not a question. I did. She pressed her lips together, smoothed her hands along her slacks, and lowered herself onto the bottom step like someone settling in for a conversation she'd been rehearsing for years. "Then you saw," she said. "You saw the things I've been collecting for her. They're not for her, Mom. They're sized for Lily. They're sized for an 8-year-old. For Emily's daughter." That stopped me cold. Emily doesn't have a daughter. Carol looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not guilty. Not defensive. Certain. Convinced. The way someone looks when they've lived inside a delusion, so long it has become load-bearing. "Lily could be our second chance," she said. The words hit the hallway like a slap. She kept going. "Emily made mistakes. I know that. But she's still mine. She'll come back. And when she does, she'll need to see that we kept her place, that we didn't forget. Lily is the right age, She has Emily's eyes, Myra. You've always known that." I stared at her. My mother was not asking for forgiveness. She was asking me to accept that she had been slowly, methodically replacing my daughter with the ghost of my sister, and she believed that was love. Roger stood in the living room doorway. He didn't speak. His eyes were red, and he gripped the door frame as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. He knew. He had always known. I picked up my bag, walked past both of them, and drove home without another word. I didn't cry in the car. I wanted to. There was a pressure behind my ribs that felt like a fist trying to open. But I kept both hands on the wheel, drove the speed limit, and breathed through my nose the way I do during tax season, when a client's books are so tangled I can't find the starting thread. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the fist had unclenched. What replaced it was colder. Clearer. I sat in the garage with the engine off and opened my phone. Photos of every receipt. Photos of the note. Photos of the boxes. 4 monogram dresses. 3 cardigans, the bracelet, a folder full of transfers to Reno. I didn't have a speech. I didn't have a plan. Not yet. But I had the numbers. And numbers don't lie. They don't gaslight you. They don't call you 6 times before breakfast and tell you that you're reading too much into things. Daniel was putting Lily to bed when I came inside. I waited until her door clicked shut. Then I sat him down at the kitchen table and laid out everything. The boxes. The receipts. Emily and Reno. Carol's delusion about Lily. $38,000. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he rubbed his face with both hands and said one thing. "So what are you going to do?" "What I do for a living," I told him. "Build a file, document every line item, and then show them, all of them, exactly where the money went." Them? Everyone. Carol wanted me to be the only one who didn't know. So now everyone is going to know. He nodded slowly. Okay. A pause. You sure you're all right? No, I said. But I'm accurate. That'll have to be enough for now. I spent the next 4 days in full CPA mode. Every night after Lily went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and my laptop and built the file. Not a diary. Not a grievance list. A proper reconciliation. The kind I'd submit to a client whose CFO had been quietly skimming. I started with my bank records. 3 years of outgoing transfers, Zelle payments, and autopay confirmations. I printed each one and highlighted accordingly. Then I pulled the insurance claims from the supplemental plan I'd been funding for Roger, every appointment, every copay, every explanation of benefits, and cross-referenced them against Carol's requests. The pattern was surgical. Every time Carol called with a new expense, a stress test, a medication change, an ER visit, the actual cost was a fraction of what she quoted me. The surplus went to Reno. I traced the mortgage payments. Current. Every month. Covered by my autopay. The property taxes. Also paid, indirectly by me. The phone plan active on my account. Then I dug deeper and found something I had nearly forgotten. A co-signed personal loan from 3 years ago. Carol had asked me to co-sign when Emily first disappeared, claiming they needed a bridge until Roger's disability paperwork cleared. The disability had been approved within weeks. The loan was still open. Balance. $6,200. My name was on it. My credit. My liability. I added it to the file. By Thursday night, I had a 23-page document, tabbed, color-coded. Every claim Carol had made across 3 years, matched against the verifiable record, with the variance noted in red. $41,000 in total outflows. $38,000 confirmed rerouted to Emily. The remaining $3,000 unaccounted for, probably cash, probably untraceable. I closed the folder and labeled the tab, Brandt Family Reconciliation. Daniel looked at it from across the table. That's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. On Friday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. 775 area code. Reno. I almost didn't answer. Then I did, because I was done not knowing things. Myra, it's Emily. Her voice was lighter than I remembered. Warmer, even like she was calling to catch up over coffee rather than crawling out of 3 years of silence. Hey, listen. I know it's been a while, but Mom said things are tight right now, and I was wondering if I could. What, Emily? Just help out a little. Like you always do. Family helps family, right? I held the phone away from my face and stared at it, the way you stare at an appliance that has just caught fire. Then I brought it back. Are you in Reno? A pause. A long one. Mom told you. Nobody told me anything. I'm an accountant. Where do you think I learned to follow a paper trail? Another pause, then softer. Look, I know how it looks. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you drained our parents, disappeared, and then let them funnel my money to you for 3 years while telling me it was for Dad's heart. It's more complicated than a beat. The dress turned out cute, by the way. Dead silence. She knew about the dress. Of course she did. She'd probably chosen it herself. I didn't mean for what? For my daughter to find someone else's name sewn into her birthday gift. Emily exhaled, long and unsteady. For half a second, I heard something that might have been genuine shame. Then it passed. I'm going through a hard time, Myra. You don't know what it's like. You're right, I said. I don't. I hung up. Then I added Emily, confirmed contact, aware of dress to the file. I know a lot of you are yelling at your screen right now. Cut them off already. I hear you. But I needed it airtight first. If you've ever had to stay composed while everything inside you burned, hit that like button and stay with me. That same afternoon, I called Carol, not to argue, not to cry, but to present findings. Mom, I've reviewed the financials. Myra, don't start. In the last 36 months, I've sent you and Dad $41,000 beyond the mortgage and insurance autopay. $38,000 of that was transferred to Emily in Reno. She went quiet. I could hear the television in the background. Some daytime court program, a judge striking a gavel. You had no right to go through my things. You had no right to take my money and lie about where it was going. It wasn't lying. It was, we were protecting you. You'd never understand. Emily needs. Emily is 37 years old. She's still my daughter. And I'm not. That landed differently than I expected. Not like a weapon, like a fact I'd been carrying for 30 years without ever once saying aloud. Carol recovered quickly. She always did. If you make this into something, Myra, you'll be the one who tears this family apart. Everyone will know what you did. What I did. Walking away from your own parents. Your sick father. Over money. Over lies. Mom, don't you dare. I'll see you Sunday. I hung up. She had just revealed her strategy. She was going to frame this as me abandoning them. She was going to rally the extended family. She was going to transform the dinner table into a tribunal with me in the dock. Fine. I had 23 pages that said otherwise. Let her set the stage. I bring the script. Saturday morning, the day before the dinner, my mother made a mistake. She called to ask whether I was bringing Lily on Sunday. I said no. Carol said fine, but then whether she had forgotten the dress, forgotten the boxes, or forgotten everything we'd said on the phone, she added, I bought the cutest little sweater for Emily. Would you bring her measurements? She meant Lily. She was talking about my daughter. She had simply used the wrong name, or the name she had decided was the right one. Mom, did you just call my daughter Emily? Silence. You know what I meant. Say her name. What? Say my daughter's name, Mom. Feet. 2. Lily. I said Lily. No, you didn't. I hung up for the last time. 2 hours later, Daniel came home from a job site to find me sitting on the floor of Lily's bedroom, watching her sort through her rock collection. She looked up at me with those brown eyes, her eyes, not Emily's, not anyone else's, and said, Mommy, who is Emily? Grandma keeps calling me that, and I don't know who that is. I pulled her into my lap. She was getting too big for it, all elbows and knees, but she curled in anyway. Emily is your aunt, I said. She lives far away. She has her own name, and you have yours. Good, Lily said. I like my name. I like your name too, baby. I kissed the top of her head and made a decision that had been building for weeks but crystallized in that moment. I wasn't just going to show my parents the receipts tomorrow. I was going to make certain that everyone at that table understood. Lily is Lily, and nobody was going to write her into someone else's story. Not while I was breathing. That afternoon, while Lily napped and Daniel was out for groceries, I sat at my laptop and began pulling plugs. First, the mortgage autopay. I logged into the servicer's portal and canceled the recurring transfer, effective immediately. Confirmation email received. Then the supplemental insurance. I called the carrier and asked about removing my father as a dependent from the plan I was funding. The representative walked me through the paperwork. It would take effect at the end of the billing cycle, 30 days out. I completed the form and submitted it. The phone plan came next. I called the carrier, removed my parents' 2 lines from the family bundle, and absorbed the modest penalty for a mid-cycle change. Their phones would remain active until the billing period closed, then go dark. Finally, the cosign loan. I called the lender and asked about removing myself as cosigner. They explained it wasn't possible without a refinance or full payoff. I noted that in the file and flagged it for follow-up. I'd address it after Sunday. Every cancellation was documented. Dates, confirmation numbers, screenshots of the portal pages. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it the way I'd counsel any client who discovered a financial dependent had been diverting funds. Cut the exposure. Document the action. Prepare for the conversation. It wasn't revenge. It was a reconciliation of my accounts, of my boundaries, of the ledger I'd been keeping wrong for 30 years. Daniel came home and set the bags on the counter. He noticed the confirmation emails still open on my screen. How much were we sending them total? Just over $1,700 a month. Plus extras. He leaned back against the counter and exhaled slowly. That's almost half a car payment. That's exactly half a car payment, I said. He looked at me. Good. Carol had billed the family dinner as a get-together. She'd framed it to the relatives as a long-overdue Sunday meal, nothing dramatic, just family catching up. But I knew the choreography. I'd watched her run this particular play before. Once when Emily dropped out of cosmetology school and Carol needed to reshape the narrative before Aunt Diane heard it from someone else. The cast would be familiar. Grandma Ruth, who lived nearby and never missed a meal. Aunt Diane, Carol's younger sister, who admired Carol and trusted her version of events without question. Uncle Pete, Diane's husband, who mostly ate in silence and sided with whoever spoke loudest. A couple of cousins filling seats and supplying the ambient pressure of an audience. Carol wanted numbers. She wanted me surrounded, outnumbered, by people who had already absorbed her version of events. Myra is pulling away. Myra stopped helping. Myra is breaking her sick father's heart over a misunderstanding about a dress. She was counting on me to fold, to sit quietly while the table turned against me, the way I had sat quietly my entire childhood while Emily received the spotlight and I received the responsibility. She didn't know I had changed the math. I ironed the pink dress, the one with Emily stitched on the collar, folded it carefully into a canvas tote bag alongside the 23-page file. I zipped the bag shut and set it by the front door. Daniel offered to come. I shook my head. Stay with Lily. I need you here when I get back. You're going alone? I'm going prepared. He handed me my car keys and kissed my forehead. Give them hell. I'm going to give them a spreadsheet. That's worse, he said. She wanted an audience. I happen to need witnesses. I pulled up to my parents' house at 6:10. The driveway was full. Diane's Subaru. Pete's truck. Grandma Ruth's Lincoln Town car, which she still drove at 86 despite everyone's objections. Through the front window I could see them gathered in the dining room. The good china was out. Carol had even lit the candles. I walked in with the tote bag over my shoulder. Carol met me at the door with a hug so firm it felt like a tourniquet. I'm so glad you came, sweetheart, she whispered, just loud enough for the room to hear. We've all been so worried about you. She guided me to the table. Grandma Ruth was seated at the far end, napkin already in her lap, eyes sharp behind her bifocals. Diane sat across from her beside Pete, who was buttering a roll. Two cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas, Tyler and Beth, occupied the end seats, looking mildly uncomfortable in the way people do when they've been summoned to a dinner that is clearly about something else entirely. Roger sat at the head of the table. He looked older than he had a week ago. His hands rested flat on either side of his plate, and he didn't look at me when I sat down. Carol served pot roast. She passed the green beans. She complimented Ruth's blouse and asked Diane about her garden. It was a masterclass in manufacturing normalcy before delivering the blow. I ate. I waited. I kept the tote bag on the floor beside my chair. By the time the plates were cleared and Carol brought out a peach cobbler she had almost certainly baked that morning as a prop for exactly this performance, she was ready. She set the cobbler down, folded her hands, and addressed the table. I asked everyone here because I need your help. Carol surveyed the room the way a director checks sight lines, confirming everyone was in position. As some of you may know, she began, her voice catching just enough to sell it, Myra has decided to stop helping us financially. Your father, Roger, is 67 years old with a serious heart condition, and Myra has cut off the support we depend on. She let that settle. Diane's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Ruth said nothing. Tyler shifted in his seat. Carol pressed on, flattening her palms against the table, a gesture I recognized from childhood, the one she deployed when she wanted to appear grounded and reasonable. I'm not asking anyone to take sides. I'm simply asking you as family to help Myra understand that walking away from your parents, from your sick father, is not something you do over a disagreement about a child's dress. She looked directly at me with an expression calibrated to project hurt rather than hostility. I had seen that face 1,000 times. It was the one she wore when she wanted you to feel sorry for her without quite noticing she had just accused you of something. Diane turned to me, her voice measured, the tone of someone who had been briefed but not entirely convinced. Myra, is that true? You stopped helping with Roger's medical bills. I stopped all financial support. Yes. But his heart? Carol said, the specialist. Diane, I'll get to that. Roger stared at his plate. His hands hadn't moved. He was a man sitting at the center of a conversation he had known was coming and had done nothing to stop, not because he was powerless, but because powerless was easier than honest. Carol wasn't finished. I just want us to be a family again. That's all I've ever wanted. After everything we've been through with Emily. Let's talk about Emily, I said. I reached down and unzipped the tote bag. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a conversational pause, but the airless quiet of a table that senses something is about to land. I set the folder down first. 23 pages. Tabbed, color-coded. The label facing Carol. Brandt family reconciliation. Then I pulled out the dress. Pink cotton, Peter Pan collar, pearl buttons. I unfolded it slowly and laid it flat on the table beside the cobbler, collar facing up so everyone could see the embroidery. White thread, neat cursive. Emily. Ruth leaned forward, adjusting her bifocals. Diane's lips parted. Pete set his napkin down. This is the dress my parents sent my daughter for her 8th birthday, I said. My voice was low and steady. I didn't rush. The name on it is not my daughter's name. My daughter's name is Lily. I opened the folder and turned it toward the table. This is a 3-year financial record. Every month, I sent my parents money for Dad's heart, for the house, for the emergencies Mom described on the phone. In the last 36 months, that total exceeded $41,000. I tapped the red column. $38,000 of that was transferred to Emily in Reno, Nevada, where she has been living for 3 years. Diane's hand rose to her mouth. Ruth closed her eyes. My parents knew where Emily was the entire time, I continued. They used the money I sent, money I believed was keeping Dad alive, and rerouted it. Every fabricated copay, every phantom water heater, every we're struggling phone call. It went to Emily. And they've been purchasing children's clothing embroidered with Emily's name in my daughter's size, keeping a closet full of it in Emily's old bedroom. I looked directly at my mother. She was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. My daughter has a name. It isn't Emily. Carol stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor and struck the wall behind her. You had no right, she said, her voice rising. You went through my house. You went through Emily's room. You had no right to touch her things. Her things, Diane said, staring at the dress on the table. Carol, those are children's clothes. They're for Emily. They're for when she comes back. Carol's voice cracked and climbed. The composed, rehearsed woman from 5 minutes ago had vanished. In her place was something raw, not remorse, not guilt, but fury at being exposed. You don't understand what it's like, she said, turning to the table, searching desperately for an ally. She's my baby. She's always been my baby. I was keeping her place. I was making sure she had something to come home to. With my money, I said. You were always jealous. She spun toward me, tears streaming, finger raised. From the time you were 5 years old, you couldn't stand that Emily was special, that she was mine in a way you never. She stopped herself. But the sentence was already in the room. Ruth placed her hands flat on the table. Her voice was thin and hard, like a wire pulled taut. Sit down, Carol. Carol sat, not because she wanted to, but because Ruth was 86 and still the only person in the family who could make Carol Bran obey a 2-word command. Then Roger spoke. The first words he'd offered all evening. His voice was low, fractured, exhausted. I knew, he said. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was staring at the dish of cobbler, as though it held the last 30 years of his marriage. I knew she was sending the money. I knew about the clothes. I let her do it because I was too tired to fight. He paused. I'm sorry, Myra. I waited for more. There wasn't any. Ruth spoke next. She looked at me from across the table, past the dress, past the folder, past her own daughter who was weeping into a dinner napkin, and said, I always knew they leaned on you too hard. I told your mother that when you were 12. I told her again when Emily left. She turned to Carol. I told you, and you said I was being dramatic. Diane had pulled a page from the folder toward her and was reading through the dates, the amounts, the routing numbers. She looked up at Carol with an expression I recognized, the look of someone whose version of reality has just quietly collapsed. You told me Myra was being selfish, Diane said quietly. You called me 3 times this week and told me she was abandoning you over a dress. She set the page down. It's $41,000, Carol, and a closet full of clothes with the wrong child's name on them. That's not complicated. I don't even know what that is. Pete said nothing. Tyler looked at his plate. Beth had her phone under the table. Nobody touched the cobbler. The room had shifted the way rooms do when a story gets rewritten in front of the people who believed the original, not with shouting, not with a verdict, but with the slow, heavy recognition that the person who had been narrating everything was the one who had been lying all along. I didn't need them to take sides. I didn't need anyone to declare me right. I simply needed them to see what had been happening behind the closed door at the end of that hallway and decide for themselves. I stood up. The chair didn't scrape. I pushed it back slowly, the way you close a book after reaching the final page. I'm not going to yell, I said. I'm not going to threaten or make demands. I'm going to tell you what's already been done. I looked at Carol, then at Roger. I've canceled the mortgage autopay. I've removed Dad from the supplemental insurance plan I was funding. I've dropped your phone lines from my account. I've flagged the cosign loan for resolution. Carol made a sound, half gasp, half moan. Roger closed his eyes. I don't hate you, I continued. I don't hate Emily. You can send her every dollar you earn. That is your choice. But you will not use my money to fund it. And you will not use my daughter to replace the child you lost. I picked up the folder. I left the dress on the table. Let them look at it. Let them read the name. Love Emily all you want, I said from the doorway. You will not rebuild her out of my child. Ruth nodded once. Diane wiped her eyes. Pete stared at the tablecloth. Carol said nothing. For the first time in my life, my mother had absolutely nothing to say. I walked to my car, placed the folder on the passenger seat, and drove home beneath a sky that was just beginning to darken. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I turned on the radio and let a song I didn't recognize fill the silence. It was the quietest drive of my life, and I don't think I had ever felt more awake. The calls began that night. Carol. Roger. Carol again from Roger's phone. Then Diane gently asking if I was all right. Then Carol from a number I didn't recognize, the landline I had forgotten they still had. I let everyone go to voicemail. The messages followed a pattern that might have been almost comical if it weren't my family. Pleading, then guilt, then anger, then pleading again. Carol left one at midnight that began, "You can't just walk away from your parents, Myra. The Bible says." I deleted it before she finished the verse. Over the following 2 weeks, the consequences arrived in pieces, the way they do when you remove the foundation from beneath a house that believed it was standing on its own. The mortgage servicer issued a late notice. Without my autopay, the first payment had been missed. Carol called Diane in a panic, and Diane, who now had 23 pages of context, told her to contact a financial counselor. Roger's supplemental insurance lapsed at the end of the billing cycle. He remained covered by Medicare, still had access to his cardiologist, but the premium plan with the reduced copays was gone. He'd used the standard tier like everyone else. Their phone lines went dark. Carol walked into a Verizon store and opened a prepaid plan under a number nobody recognized. And Emily went quiet. The Zelle transfers stopped because there was nothing left to transfer. 3 weeks of silence from Reno. No calls, no texts, no family helps family. When the money dried up, so did the affection. That told me everything I needed to know about what family meant to my sister. The relatives now knew the truth. Carol could no longer control the narrative, not with Diane carrying a photocopy of the receipts and Ruth telling anyone who'd listened that she had warned her daughter for years. A month later, the house was quieter than it had ever been, and I mean that in the very best way. Lily started 2nd grade. She wore a new dress on the first day, yellow cotton, white buttons, her name stitched on the inside collar in blue thread. Lily. I had ordered it myself. She ran her finger over the embroidery before putting it on and grinned at me like it was the finest thing she had ever owned. It says my name, she said. It does. Daniel and I recalculated our budget that first weekend without the $1,700 a month flowing to my parents. We didn't celebrate. It wasn't a windfall. It was money that had always been ours. We directed half into Lily's college fund and the other half toward the replacement truck Daniel's old one had been quietly demanding for months. Saturday mornings were different now. No phone ringing at 7 a.m. No voicemail from Carol about a plumber or a copay or a crisis requiring my credit card. No guilt sitting in my chest like a second breakfast. I drove past my parents' house once by accident, taking a wrong turn on the way back from the grocery store. The curtains were drawn. Roger's truck sat in the driveway. The ceramic frog was still beside the side door. I didn't stop. The door at the end of their hallway, I don't know if it's open or closed now. It isn't mine to wonder about anymore. Some doors you walk past your entire life, and one day you realize the bravest thing you can do is stop reaching for the knob. Cutting them off didn't make me the villain in my family's story. It made me the author of my daughter's. That's my story. A pink dress, a wrong name, and a folder full of receipts. If this reminded you to follow the money, do it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.